Recording this video, making sure, yes, because I am live early and I apologize for that and all the changes in time. But unfortunately, today I got called into work for a couple of evaluations and wasn't going to have a chance to jump on at lunch. And then I thought I could do it this evening, and I forgot we have a family birthday dinner. So I decided it was better to just go live early, and the recording will be up for people. But I want to jump right in, first of all, with a story I have for you. I want to tell you a story. So when I was young, I'm going to say somewhere between 8 to 10 years old, there's a family story about, just a second here, always having to play with the lights, going shoe shopping with my mother, and we went to every shoe store, having lots of issues here, in town, and tried on every pair of shoes probably known to children at that time, only to go back and buy the very first pair I tried on because none of them felt right. That's what I would say. They just don't feel right. Along those lines, especially when I was growing up, clothes were itchy, tags bothered me, socks rubbed, blankets were too scratchy. Sounds were too loud. And so a lot of just this oversensory excitation, just easily overwhelmed by sensory information in my environment. And even today, as an adult, I have what I call my sensory flares, where clothes just feel uncomfortable. And if people are bumped up against you, like airplane seats where you have to sit like with people touching the side of you all the time, it's like too much. Now those are more like flares. It's not all the time, but it does happen. And I notice, in some of my children, similar things, just sensory issues and sensory overwhelm. And then, of course, in my psychology practice, I work with a lot of families, children, all the way to adults, dealing with attention and focus issues, sensory overwhelm, anger, anxiety, so much anxiety for children today, particularly around school and test taking. It's too much. So I've always wanted, I get asked a lot about essential oil options or natural supplements to support these areas of concern: sensory overload, anxious feelings, social anxiety, attention and focus. That's a huge one. And I have some options. I have some great protocols that I've used successfully, both with my own children and with families. But there was always a piece that just kind of was missing and didn't quite hit the mark. And this convention in September, doTERRA released a set of products that's like it. I'm like, there it is. There it is. Puzzle piece fit together. It's the missing piece. And that is their new Adaptiv line, which actually releases tomorrow. And everyone who got it at convention and has been trying it for the last 2 weeks now, I guess, is just amazing testimonials and responses. And so I think it's going to be a big run, and we may break the internet tomorrow when this product releases. But I wanted to share with you some of the science behind that, what's in these products and why they work. Today, we're going to actually talk about the soft gels. And so the product line, trying to see where I have them over there. I think it has 3 different products with it. The Adaptiv, they're called Adaptiv. So with doTERRA products, one of the things I always recommend people is the name will tell you a lot about what it's going to help with. So adapting, coping with those sensory issues, with environmental issues. The subname, the subtitle on it is the calming blend, calming the parts of the brain that tend to overreact. Because what is anxiety really? It's really an overreaction to a perceived threat that generally is not real. If the threat is real, it's not anxiety. So if you're about to be in a car accident and you're kind of on high alert with adrenaline and stress hormones and everything, that's not anxiety. That's like a good reaction to a threat. But if you're having that same reaction, stress hormones and beating heart and rapid breathing, and there's no threat around you, that's anxiety in a very small nutshell. And anyone who's experienced it has known that's a little oversimplified, but it helps get an idea. Well, anyways, calming blend, calming those parts of the brain. And so one of the things I'm going to do here off and on is share my screen with you. My screen, the notes just kind of help me to stay on track. But also there's some parts of it that I think will help you to see it while I talk about it. And I'm going to talk mostly about the supplements today. I got off track. 3 parts: a supplement, a oil that can be used in a diffuser, and then a roll-on that's already diluted and ready for just topical use. So healthy brains. So healthy brains have 3 different things that are very key for brain function. Neurotransmitters. We hear a lot about neurotransmitters. It's very today to talk about serotonin and dopamine. GABA is another very powerful neurotransmitter. There's more, but these are the 3 you hear of most, particularly with relation to psychological concerns. Next, which you don't hear about as much, is alkaloids. And alkaloids actually are sustaining and transmitting these neurotransmitters. They're helping them to move from place to place and to helping them work more effectively. So this is pretty key. You have to have these as well, or it doesn't matter what your neurotransmitter levels are. They're not going to work as effectively. And then last is essential fatty acids. The brain is a huge percent fatty acid. Which I don't love that, you get a fat brain, but no, that's not what it's saying. But this is a critical element to brain function, and these are like your omega oils. And in one of my previous videos, I talked about foods with healthy fatty acids in them, like avocados and nuts, hemp seeds, things like that. But the brain needs these 3 things to be working really well to have healthy brain function, brain wellness, right? So real brief brain history here. When I'm talking about anxiety in the threat center, right, we're talking about this little tiny part deep in the brain called the amygdala. And you can see that little tiny blue dot. It seems tiny. It's a major part of the limbic system connected to the hypothalamus, the pituitary glands, the hippocampus. And these areas regulate memory, they regulate emotion, and here regulating threat. And so any response to fear or to danger is going to start with an autonomic response in this amygdala. So important part of the brain, right? So the brain's threat center has 2 goals, two jobs. That's a better word, jobs. Threat detection, like make sure you're paying attention to the gigantic dog that's running at me really fast while growling and barking, or to the tiger that just got loose at the zoo. You get my point? And then threat response. Now, how do I need to respond to this? So it's taking a threat and deciding, tiger loose at the zoo, huge threat, needs huge reaction from my body. Paper cut, small threat, small reaction from my body. But again, any of these areas can get off track. So now maybe the brain's detecting a threat where there isn't one. Okay, now we have a problem because it's overreacting when there's not an actual threat. Or it's viewing very small threats as big threats and creating a big reaction. You also can have the opposite where it's viewing big threats and not creating a reaction. But that kind of sends us in a different direction. So we're not going to address that as much today. Then the second thing is, how does it respond? And that's, I kind of said, it needs to respond appropriately to the level of threat. So when it's activated, this amygdala, we get this defensive reaction as well as a regulatory response. And those responses become either extreme and very defensive or appropriate and life-saving at times. And it's a circuit that works all throughout the brain, from the amygdala to the hippocampus, to the midbrain, to the brainstem, which is like your basic brain that's like, just keep me alive, right? But it's controlling everything from heartbeat to breathing, to the hormone release in our body. And now that's regulating anxiety and fear responses. So if it gets off, then those anxiety responses can get out of control. So as you're looking at this, it's also impacting short-term memory. That's why a lot of times people have a hard time remembering things from a trauma or a very threatening experience. And it's releasing those stress hormones like cortisol, adrenaline, and then it's activating this frontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that then thinks and makes decisions. And so we need all of this process working very well. However, if the brain stays at a very activated level for a long period of time, it kind of starts to overload and things start to misfire or lose track. And there's lots of research showing the effect of continued elevated stress on the brain, and particularly on children in their developing brains, that some of the pathways in their brain start to lay down inappropriate responses that can become long-term responses. So that elevated stress level is not good, and we know that, and you'll see it start to impact all areas of your brain. So next step then, I'm going to go back to my share here real quick. I don't know where it went. There it goes. So when we then look at that activation and those circuit connections, we need products that can actually regulate or address them. And so this is where I want to talk about the new product, because the amazing thing about doTERRA's products are you can have one piece of this, like this selenium root that we're going to talk about here in a minute, and that may have amazing benefits in some areas, but when we combine them into a scientifically studied and developed formula, all working together, you get a synergy that's so much more powerful. Now, this is a new product, and so what I had to do with research is to look at the different pieces of the product and see what research supports the areas that we're hoping this product will help with. And so that's what I was looking for. And the first one being this selenium root, or canna, it's sometimes called. And this has been around for a long, long time, primarily with use in South Africa. And a long history of people in South Africa chewing this root, using it as medicine, using it to enhance mood. It promotes relaxation. They've used it for babies, for colic. It also at times can promote kind of a sense of euphoria. And actually several of my friends who've taken this product since getting it at convention reported that, like, my gosh, I feel almost euphoric. And it's probably the selenium or the canna in there. So shepherds used to use this when they had to walk long, long distances with limited food, because it helped to kind of regulate and decrease appetite. So with the selenium root, a lot of research, as well as just anecdotal history of improved mood, decreased anxiety, decreased stress, decreased tension. And it initially can be very stimulating, but then can have a follow-up effect of being somewhat sedating. So we kind of get both that activate the brain, but then calm the brain. And so people who've been the testimonies, I've read lots and lots of testimonies to see the different reactions people are getting to these supplements. Some are finding that euphoric, very stimulating, very calming to the brain, but making them feel really alert and focused. And so they're taking them during the day. Other people notice more of the calming and almost sedating and are preferring to take it at night. Again, your body knows what it needs. And so this is what doTERRA actually says about the selenium that's in the Adaptiv. So it is a phytochemical, meaning it comes from a plant, and it's helping create a feeling of alert serenity. Alert serenity. You know, that's just a really powerful description if you think about what that means, of having your brain be focused and on track, but not in that danger or threat zone. So mood stabilizing, improving cognitive function, while also helping with feelings of nervousness. So some of the research on the selenium that I did look at is that there has been research on it and how it impacts the dual 5-HT reuptake. Now, 5-HT is very related to serotonin, and the medications we're familiar with, like serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which just means it's keeping the body from soaking those back up, so the serotonin stays available to the brain, and so it's still floating around in there. And the selenium has found to be an inhibitor in the amygdala, so it prevents, again, those threat responses or overactivation. One study I read said it decreased the amygdala fear reaction with just 25 milligrams of the selenium root, and it also improved the amygdala and hypothalamus connection. And that connection is where the brain's talking to, like, how big of a threat is this, and do I need to respond to it, as well as impacting memory. So again, we got that alert calmness, right? So basically what the selenium root is doing is it's decreasing or bringing down that threat circuitry in the brain. So either we're not detecting big threats when there's none, or we're responding appropriately when there is a threat. So one of the issues, and a lot of people are asking about these compared to medication, and I'm not going to jump in a whole lot to comparing the medication in here, but when you look at the SSRIs, which is many of our antidepressants, they also are inhibiting that 5-HT, which is a component of serotonin, inhibiting that reuptake, but they are then increasing another chemical which can reduce the sensitivity to the SSRIs over time. So the longer you take them, the less sensitivity your brain has to them, the less they work. And studies show that not happening with the selenium root. So, interesting little comparison there. All right, so next part of this, go back to showing you kind of, some side effects. People always wonder about side effects. Now, this is taking the selenium straight, so not necessarily in doTERRA's supplement, but it's just things to watch for. Mild headache, slight nausea, soft stool, transient increase in irritability. So a short time increase in irritability, or I have seen some of my friends, but most of the time they were people who did not have a lot of anxiety or nervousness to start with. And when they tried this, they saw some irritability, but taking it in the evening, they didn't see that. Again, these are like really high dosages and no severe side effects have ever been documented. I need to pull the bottle to tell you what the milligrams of this is in doTERRA's product, but I want to keep going so I'm not over way too much time. Okay, so the second piece of this Adaptiv product is GABA. So GABA comes out a lot when we're talking about neurotransmitters. And here's a great way to think about it as being the brakes of the brain. So of all the neurotransmitters, GABA is your chief inhibiting neurotransmitter. So it's the one pulling things down. Now, activating transmitters or hormones such as cortisol or adrenaline can overstimulate, and at times we need that. Again, tiger loose in the zoo. But GABA is the one that really comes into play when we're needing to calm things down and settle down some of the other chemical reactions that are happening in the brain. And GABA is actually a substance unto itself. It is, that's an acronym. I think I had it written down here. Maybe I didn't. It's GABA. Well, I'm not going to try. It's GABA buconic acid, something like that. But it's decreasing neuron excitability. So when our neurons get overly active, right, then things can start to go a little haywire. And that's what GABA is regulating that down when it needs to regulate down. It's primarily inhibitory in adult brains, but it can be very excitatory to developing brains, which makes it very interesting to me considering how this product may impact children differently than it does adults. And sometimes with children, what's happening is their brains, in a very oversimplified way, is functioning too slow, and that we kind of see the lack of focus and the distractibility, and we're needing to kind of speed that up. And so this has some interesting potential there. These GABA cell receptors, so the receptors that actually receive GABA and use it, are found throughout the body, but primarily in the brain, but also in the pancreas, the digestive tract, the kidneys, the urinary tract, the lungs, the liver, the testes, so hormone balance here as well. So huge impacts on numerous different areas of the body, including brain function and healthy brain function, but also autoimmune functioning, inflammatory responses, even respiratory things, glucose and blood sugar level balancing. So GABA, very, very important. And increased GABA in studies, so now we're going back to actual research studies that I looked at, increased GABA can be relaxing and an anti-anxiolytic, so decreasing anxiety or nervousness, and anti-convulsive, and and this can be a piece of medication, and you can actually buy GABA by itself in a supplement, but it's very hard to find any that can cross the blood-brain barrier and actually impact the brain, and that you don't want it in these super high dosages, so it's actually a fairly low dose in the Adaptiv, but the right blend to combine with the other products. And so when you look at some research in GABA and ADHD in particularly, one reference study looking at the imbalanced neurotransmitters in ADHD, this has come straight from their summary of their study, finding higher levels of glutamate, which again is exciting and excitatory, it's an activating neurotransmitter, and decreased levels of GABA, which is again your brakes on your brain. It's that slowing down. So this imbalance, they were suggesting may be impacting the ADHD symptoms such as poor impulse control and hyperactivity. So the research was small, but it does have a big impact in thinking about how to correct this imbalance. And the study that doTERRA did with Adaptiv, they also did a study with children down to age 12 all the way to adults, looking at test anxiety in reaction to having this diffuse, the oils, or the supplement, and saw a huge improvement both in feelings of anxiety as reported by the test subjects and an improvement in their ability to complete the test. So very interesting studies there. Those were phase 0 studies. They are moving into phase 1, meaning much more intensive and comprehensive studies, but those were scientifically run double-blind controlled studies completed by doTERRA with the Adaptiv product in particular. This is doTERRA. What doTERRA has to say about GABA in the Adaptiv: promoting relaxation, natural comforting effects, again, decreasing that neuronal excitability, the excitability of the brain. So I love this. Just think, brakes on the brain. So if you ever feel like your brain is just running away with itself, which I definitely do at times, GABA, brakes on the brain. Any side effects? I looked for research on any side effects. Again, very minor, and this is when you're taking a straight GABA, but sometimes people experience upset stomach, headaches, sleepiness, muscle weakness. But that's a straight GABA, which usually has quite a higher milligram in per pill than anything in the Adaptiv. Okay, one final supplement or herbal supplement that's in this product is the ahi flower. So if you remember, we talked about 3 different things the brain needed. The brain needed neurotransmitters, which our initial selenium root was helping those neurotransmitters be more available to the brain. Then we needed the alkaloids, those transmitters helping, which is the GABA, the brakes on the brain. And then we needed the fatty acid or fatty oils. That's your omegas for the brain. So ahi flower is a oil that's very, very rich in omega-3s. So that's a vegan oil, an alternative to fish oil and flax oil, and very rich in SDA, an omega acid, which then transforms into the products our brain needs, the DHA and the EPA. You can find these also in fish oil, but this is an amazing option and is a part of the Adaptiv supplement. So ahi flower is very unique in that, in addition to the omegas we're used to, it's very high in the SDA content, where fish oil tends to be higher in the DHA and the EPA, which all these acronyms I know, but frequently it's very hard for our body to receive that, and it's very limited bioavailability, meaning even if you take it, the body doesn't necessarily process it very well. But all SDA, which is again just a form of a fatty acid or fatty oil, all SDA can enter the bloodstream and then can be converted to those other things, DHA or EPA, which then now the body is utilizing it, which can be very anti-inflammatory and just supporting brain function. It just makes our brains work better. So we've got these 3 things all working in conjunction. And then, of course, we've got to have some essential oils in there to just round it out and make this beautiful supplement work as well as it did. So you may have seen that list before I turned it off. Then the Adaptiv has these 3 oils in it. And the research on these oils, there's tons of research on all of 3 of these, but lavender is probably one of the most researched oils, either lavender or peppermint. And if you want actual scientific studies showing how calming it is, how it can help the brain even create melatonin, just very soothing and stabilizing. Coriander is very well known, and I had some other things I was going to read to you while I looked at these. Very well known for improving brain function as well as impacting digestive tract. And a lot of our emotional functioning happens in our digestive tract as well. So you can't ignore that piece and how important that can be. And coriander also helping with teaching us just to feel happy, not to repress emotions, and to feel more encouraged and connected to our true selves and our true beliefs. Wild orange is one of the ones I diffuse frequently in my psychology office, although I'm going to take this Adaptiv. I had it and then I brought it home and now I need to take it back to diffuse. But wild orange just really promotes feelings of joy, abundance, calming, very calming to that amygdala and those parts of the brain, the threat response parts of the brain. And then lastly, we have fennel. Now, again, we have some digestive impact here, which is important, of just helping our emotions kind of happen in 3 different places: our brains, our hearts, and our guts. And so we need to address all 3 of those things. But fennel also just balancing the hormonal reactions in our body, balancing our brain, and helping us when we just feel overwhelmed. So particularly overwhelmed by those sensory experiences. So, that's there's one of the research links. So just an amazing option for balancing. Now, this is primarily, we're talking about the supplement, and I will come on later to talk about the oil. But I think for any of those times when your brain just tends to feel overwhelmed, whether that's overwhelmed by sensory input, overwhelmed by that threat response center, overwhelmed by just feeling like your brain can't focus and can't get on track. These products are going to have some amazing options, and everyone responds differently to different things. And so this is just one of those options to try and become real aware of how your body responds, but potentially get an amazing benefit. I've read testimonials for everything from children ages 6 or 7, families using it for attention and focus, up to adults using it to cope with things they never thought they'd be able to cope with before. So this product releases tomorrow. So I can get you a specific link to purchase. If you have a doTERRA account, you'll be able to log into your doTERRA account tomorrow and purchase this October 1st. If you do not have a doTERRA account, I can't get you a link today because those links aren't available until tomorrow, but I can get you information and get you a link tomorrow on getting started with this or with my mental wellness kit. So I have a whole kit that I recommend, and you can choose pieces of that or all of it, and we would work to find the best options for you. But if this particular product is something you're interested in or want to know more about, just drop me a note. And tomorrow, I think it's going to be we may break the internet. All right, it was great chatting with y'all today. Sorry again about the changes in time, but I look forward to hearing your comments and any questions that you have.